All right, the next episode. I'm wearing the same clothes because I recorded this straight after the last episode. I want to talk today. This topic was suggested to me by Connor Kiernan from Ireland. He suggested talking about making powerlifting a more professional sport. And I'll tell you one thing before I get started. One thing I really appreciate about Jeordie, who's the man behind the camera, is that he wears cargo pants, but not ironically. He just whipped out a mother from like one of the pockets that you wouldn't have even known there was a mother sitting in there. You just got to stay ready at all times. But yes, I want to talk about making powerlifting more professional. I really appreciate the suggestion because it is something that I have made it a bit of a personal mission to set out to do. Maybe not so much directly. I am involved, obviously, with big powerlifting competitions and as a coach and as a gym owner and all of that. I see my part in the ecosystem, but I'm certainly pushing in that direction because I feel that's where I'd really like to see it go, mainly because powerlifters don't really get rewarded. And a lot of people leave the sport because there is no reward or very limited reward. And outside of that, the more professional we make it, the more general appeal there is, the more people can come on board. So that's basically what I want to talk about today. I want to touch on something real quick first because Jeordie actually suggested this just before I started recording, which is like, why don't we try and get in the Olympics? And if you're not familiar, powerlifting has actually been tried to put into the Olympics. So the IPF got IOC, International Olympic Committee, recognition back in the day, maybe like back in. They've had it twice. They had it and then they lost it and they got it again, I believe. But this is going back 10 years or so. And recognition doesn't really mean anything. It's kind of like you're on the list. We might consider it. We might keep an eye on it. I'm sure there's a lot of red tape, a lot of hoops you have to jump through to actually make it to the Olympics. And of course, it never made it into the Olympics. If anything, with weightlifting being sort of tarnished a lot by performance-enhancing drug uses, powerlifting is certainly not very high on the list. And there's several reasons why it probably would never make it to the Olympics. Some of them being it's not very spectator friendly, which I'm going to highlight as one of the major issues or one of the major things we need to solve as a powerlifting community if we are going to make it more professional. And it's not particularly entertaining. Like until we can solve the problem of powerlifters themselves leaving a powerlifting competition when bench starts because they can't be bothered sitting around and watching it, we don't have much hope of solving that for the average Joe that we want to entertain with the sport. We really need to make it a little bit more easily accessible. So I don't want to come across as suggesting like I'm the only person on earth that's involved or interested in making powerlifting more professional, because in the 20-ish years I've been watching powerlifting and in the 12 years, 13 years that I've been heavily involved in powerlifting from several capacities, powerlifting has become a lot more professional. It's become bigger, it's become better, it's become more appealing, it's grown an enormous amount, and there's more and more money increasingly in the sport from a variety of different directions. We are on the way, but we are nowhere near being what could be truly classified as a professional sport, which kind of raises the question, what does that actually mean? What does a professional sport mean? For me personally, and this is in line with what most people would say, or if you Google it, what you'll probably find, a professional sport means that the athletes are getting paid as a full-time job. Like their full-time career, their primary earning is coming from the sport itself. That's when you can deem it a professional sport, because a professional sport can't be a professional sport without professional athletes, and a professional athlete needs to be someone who is living off of the sport. So we are not anywhere near that. There are likely, and I don't know people's deals. I know of people who make an enormous amount of money from brand deals via social media. There are likely people who do make their money directly from the sport without a gym or coaching or the other things that people are normally making money from. I'm sure that there are people who are living off brand endorsements. Are they professional powerlifters? Could you say that? I would say they are a self-made professional powerlifter. Powerlifting is not paying them, but rather they are being paid to do powerlifting. And You could even argue that they're not, but rather they're being paid for their popularity, which has come from powerlifting. So we are not there yet. I would be remiss if I did not mention some of the biggest powerlifting sporting events that we have going on here. Let's talk about Sheffield, because it was the most recent thing that has happened in the powerlifting world. And I've got some figures, so forgive me if I look to the side here. But Sheffield is arguably currently the biggest prize. Let me say this again. Sheffield is currently the biggest possible prize pool. So I say biggest possible because they announce the prize pool, but they don't actually give all of the money away. It's up for grabs. So what I mean by that, the way Sheffield works, this year and last year, they had £445,000 to give away. But it only goes to the placings, so people get money for the placings. Each lifter has a cap on what they can make, which is £45,000. The number one spot is £25,000, and then £5,000 are given for each world record broken. So the reason it's 45 as the total is that if a lifter came first and broke the squat, bench press, deadlift, and total world record, 4 world records, they would get £25,000 plus 20, total of 45. So Sheffield has £445,000 up for grabs. In 2024, they paid out 185,000 of those pounds. So they didn't even end up paying half of it. Still an enormous amount of money. Do not get me wrong. Like, for some people, that is a life-changing amount of money. Absolutely. So absolute kudos to them for doing that. I think it's important to create the divide with Sheffield, because a lot of people think that it is, what am I trying to say here? Sheffield is very much SBD, not IPF. So it is an IPF sanctioned comp. SBD and IPF go hand in hand for sure. Absolutely. But make no mistake that Sheffield is an SBD competition. That's why it's in Sheffield. This is the birthplace. The UK is the birthplace of SBD. SBD is not solely interested in powerlifting, is not solely interested in drug-tested powerlifting. It has other commercial interests. Obviously, they are very closely aligned with the IPF, which is why it's in the IPF. And I think it's important to remember that the money is not the IPF money, but the money is the SBD money. Important point to make there. In terms of how they distribute the money, so first is 25K, then it goes 12.5, 7.5, 6, 4, 2, 175, 1750, 1500, 1200, 1000. So there's prize money distributed to the top 10, and then of course the record's going to be paid out. Enormous amount of money. Think that is absolutely fantastic what they are doing with that. I don't actually have facts and figures with this, but I would say that Sheffield has probably been the competition to put on the biggest show in terms of the venue and the spectators that pilgrimage to Sheffield to watch the competition. So it is a money-making machine in that sense. Now, money-making doesn't mean profit-making. I don't know the figures for Sheffield, but I can certainly be sure, in my experience running large-scale powerlifting competitions, that they're probably spending an enormous amount of money on actually setting up the show. The venue is incredible, obviously. I'm not sure the costs involved of how they kit it out and where all that equipment goes and how that all works. But obviously it is an enormous show, and it's doing great things for the possibility of what we could be doing with powerlifting as a sport. So Sheffield, absolutely fantastic. There are the next biggest prize money, or prize pool, I should say. It's important to say prize pool because 445K is an impressive amount of money. The next one I'm going to say is the US APL Pro Series, which gives upwards of $127,000 US. Sounds like an incredible amount of money, but the top winners are still not receiving that much money in the grand scheme of things. The top winner in Opens is going to receive $12,000. So that $127,000 prize pool is split across many divisions. Several placings, male, female divisions, but also masters. So like the prize money as a total lump sum is a lot to the individual lifter is good. Like, it's great that lifter can walk away with 12 grand. That's fantastic. But again, it's not life changing. And I can say the same for our Zero Pro meet, for example. Last year we gave away $27,000. And even with that, the top lifter was not getting more than $10,000. So when you've got a lot of lifters and obviously divisions, male, female, etc., we also have, pro and elite divisions. The money has to then get divvied out in a fair way across those divisions. One thing that and I can't speak for Sheffield, I can't speak for the USAPL Pro series. One thing that we were stringent about when it came to the Zero Pro is a professional. If you're in a pro flight and you have to pay to enter the competition, that's whack. Like, that is so whack. That's not professional sport. So before anyone calls me out, you did have to pay to enter, but you got your money back if you showed up to the competition. So of course we did have to collect money because we had deposits to pay on venues. We have costs involved, of course. And the last thing we wanted to do is have someone say, yeah, I'll do it, have no financial bearing on securing that spot, and then just decide a few weeks out, no, I'm not going to do it. And then someone else loses a spot. So there had to be a reason for collecting money from lifters, which we had, and we gave it all back to the pro lifters who competed. Because again, a pro competition, you shouldn't have to pay. We also felt the same about prize money. So every single pro got prize money to some degree. Of course, we didn't have a lot of money. We only had 27 grand across several lifters and several divisions, but every single pro lifter got a little bit of cash, which I think is important in terms of setting the scene moving forward as we work towards creating a more professional sport. There are definitely other pro meets around the place that are striving to make powerlifting more of a professional sport. And I'm going to list them off, and then I'll actually talk about making powerlifting more professional. So most of the pro meets around the place are sort of sitting similar to Zero Pro, somewhere in between like 10 and 50 grand, something like that. There have definitely been some competitions with a little bit more here and there, but they're few and far between because obtaining that money in a sustainable way is quite difficult. So maybe you get lucky and get a shitload of sponsorship money one year. Potentially the sponsors drop off the face of the earth, don't want to do it again. It's really important to build relationships, to have ongoing cash flow to put towards these things. But there definitely are other competitions. Now, the question is, what do we actually need to do to make powerlifting more professional? And I've got a list of these things. Yes, everyone, I will mention abs. So don't worry about that, because everyone's going to scream at me and be like, what about abs? What about abs? I will mention abs. I'm going to get to that. So for those who are unaware, abs, Jay Farron over in Ireland and his business partners, I'm not sure exactly how it's structured, absolutely doing a fantastic job of pushing powerlifting in a professional direction. I can't speak to how much money they give away. I don't know what they do in that department. I do know that Jay is very invested in lifter experience. So lifters get a great experience. I had a phone call with him not too long ago, and he was telling me like the journey the lifter goes through. And I'm not talking just pre-comp. I mean, like at the competition, when they show up for weigh-in, they receive a pack. They've listed the meal they want, whether it's cold or hot. As soon as they weigh in, they're presented with their meal. They've got custom kit, all of this sort of stuff. The guy's thinking and he's pushing, and it is fantastic. And I'm not just saying this. This is a big part of the reason Zero Equipment is getting behind abs this year, because I absolutely love what he is doing. So yes, abs, important. What do we need to do to make powerlifting more professional? So there's going to be a few categories here. Financial incentives, the money side of things, of course. The spectator appeal and the sport coverage, the presentation, the sponsors, and the professional pathways that we need to get powerlifting out there. So first thing is going to be the financial incentives. It has to be more than just prize money. We can't just give away prize money, because to just give away prize money is not necessarily creating a more professional sport. Yes, it's giving back to the lifter. It's rewarding the lifter. Now that there's more money meets out there, we are getting lifters that like to bounce from meet to meet to meet to collect their paychecks, which is fantastic. I've been a lifter most of my life. I coach the best lifters around. I know what it's like being a lifter and pushing hard, and how much heart, soul, time, energy that you put into the sport. and money, and it just straight up cash, diet, gym memberships, coaching, gear, as in like, well, all gear, belts, sleeves, other gear, if the lifter is so inclined. You put money into becoming an athlete, but it's more than just like a financial cost. There's a time cost. You're taking away from potentially pushing your own business or a side hustle or your job. You're taking away from, spending time with friends and families at times. You're putting financial costs of traveling for these competitions down. There is cost, and prize money is simply not enough, because in order to make a full-time salary from prize money, you have to win. Like, think about any other sport, any other professional sport in the NBA. You show up and lose, you still get paid. You show up to a powerlifting comp, you bomb, you're done. You don't get money. You walk away with nothing. So prize money is not enough to make it professional. It's fantastic. Step in the right direction. Myself at ZeroW and the support I provide to Daniel with APL, we are heavily, heavily invested in making sure any money generated by the sport gets shared with the people who make the sport, which is the lifter. The sport does not exist without the athlete. It's the whole point. Money has to go back to the lifter. Other financial incentives that are common in other sports, of course, include appearance fees. So you generate a shitload of money out of the sport, put some money back into paying a lifter to show up or paying an athlete to show up. I like the idea of this. I don't know how fruitful it could be for something like powerlifting, because you have to generate the money. And historically, the issue with powerlifting is that we generate the money in competitions by the entry fees themselves. So you're going to ask everyone else to pay and then take that money and give it to someone just to show up and put on a show. Like the appearance fees works in something like Sheffield. Like if you're paying the best athletes to show up and hit it out, you can charge out the door an enormous amount of money for entertainment, because let's remember, sport, the whole point of sport and monetization is entertainment. We need to create an entertaining experience for the spectator to be willing to give their money to engage in it. And so appearance fees will only work in those sort of circumstances, in my opinion, for powerlifting. But it's something we should have in the back of our heads. And of course, salaries. The question is like, who is paying the salary? Like in professional sports, it's going to be the teams that are paying the salaries of these athletes. I know that ABS has franchise lifters, people who are signed to the franchise. Again, I don't know enough about how Jay runs things to know how that works from a financial perspective, whether they are looked after in terms of competition entries or competition travel, how that works altogether. But I'd say the guy's a smart guy and got a real head for promotion. There'll be something that's incentivizing the athlete enough to sign that piece of paper. It's a step in the right direction. This is how we need to be thinking. Sometimes Jay cops flack or ABS cops flack with what they're doing because people don't understand the vision of something bigger and creating something that is going to be huge and professional. When you sit down and talk to someone like that and you realize how much of themselves they are setting aside to build a sport for other people, enormous amount of respect for anybody who's doing something like that. Okay, financial incentives is the first one. The second one was spectator appeal and coverage. So this can include things like putting on a bigger show, creating storytelling around the lifter, and of course, there's going to be the idea of making the sport look more appealing. So a simple comparison is like powerlifting to weightlifting. A lot of people would say, let's look at untested monolith style powerlifting. You got this big giant hunk of metal sitting on the platform. It's ugly. It's not a pretty sight. And from a viewership perspective, your view is very blocked. Like you've got a head ref right in front. So, you need to be seated in such a way that you can see past the referees. You've also got all this junk around the platform most of the time. You've got weight trees. Then you've got five spotters on the platform. In the case of monolift, a sixth person running the gate. It's just people everywhere. It's messy. It's not good to look at. It's just a kind of ugly sport. Actually, shout out to another Irishman, Andrew Blackwood. Andrew Blackwood floated this question. I don't know where he originally got the idea, if he came up with it or he was talking to someone, but he put it out there. Like, what if powerlifting competitions did a 2-lift meet instead of a 3-lift meet? Imagine how much faster and how much more enjoyable it would be to watch something like that. These are the kind of things we need to be considering and thinking about if we're going to make it more appealing. But absolutely simplified scoring. Scoring in powerlifting sucks so bad. The systems that we're using, open powerlifting, lifting cast, these are not necessarily innovations, right? These are technological improvements on a fractured system. We all used to use whatever it was called, the spreadsheet. It was an ugly ass spreadsheet that calculated stuff for you. Various federations also have their own softwares that they use, but lifting software just sucks. Like it doesn't tell you where is someone placed. How much do they need to go up a place? What do they need to do to beat this guy? What was their best lift? How can a spectator can't go back and see the lifter's previous lift? They're just watching it roll forward. There's no replays really. Like compared to real sports, more professional sports, powerlifting does a really bad job of presenting it as a sport. When you go watch a powerlifting competition, people are competing. Very rarely are you involved or invested in the story of the competition. As a spectator, you're often there just watching people lift. That's not how it should be. You don't go to a soccer match to watch people play soccer. You go to a soccer match to watch the competition of one team versus the other, hoping that one team beats the other team. That's how a sport should be. When you're going to watch someone and support someone, yeah, you hope they do well, you hope they win, but you have no fucking idea where they're up to when they're out there lifting. Like that story is not told very well. And that is one huge thing we have to get better at powerlifting. We need to create a spectator-friendly sport. It will be the biggest bottleneck that we have to solve collectively as a powerlifting community if we are going to see the growth that we want to see. Think of how limiting it makes the sport right now. The people that go watch powerlifting competitions are powerlifters and their family, sometimes their friends. Most powerlifters are weird. Most powerlifters don't have friends. So mostly just family, if the family hasn't disowned them for being weird. Spectators are lifters and immediate. You don't go as a normal person to just watch powerlifting because you're a hobbyist. That doesn't really happen. That's an issue. The brands that are sponsoring the sport are powerlifting brands. There's no commercial interest because there's no commercial viability because external people don't watch the sport. It's just purely insular, and we need to fix that. A big part of fixing that is going to come from making it easier to watch. I have seen competition systems built that do a good job of doing this. Back in the day when the Ruchis over in WA used to run big competitions, when they had their super gym, they had written their own program for running competitions, and it did all of that. It did teams, it did calculating. They had multiple screens in the back room that you could see, you could follow along. The live stream everything was set up for that. We need more of that sort of stuff if we're going to make this huge. Okay, presentation. Powerlifting needs to look better. Like, I'm sick of going to what is supposed to be the best powerlifting competitions in the world. I've done this so many times. I've coached so many people to international IPF competitions, done in a shitty hotel or a church or a shitty hall that they got for next to nothing, with literally no effort and energy put into the spectator experience or the lifter experience. It's just a venue. If we're going to use venues, they need to be bigger. They need to be better. They need to be set up for entertainment. And they absolutely cannot be in gyms. If we're going to make this thing professional, we got to stop running big competitions in gyms. That's not how to do it. I went to, I don't want to throw anyone under the bus. I've been to some big competitions that are meant to be venerated as the bee's knees, and they're just not good. We need to do better. That's all it is. The presentation needs to be engaging and dynamic. Nothing is worse than going to, and sorry, I'm not trying to rag on the IPF with this, but IPF are terrible at this in general. They're definitely better these days. Like IPF Worlds last year actually looked fun. But nothing is worse than going to a competition and the commentator isn't there, there's no commentator, or they just suck. Like, a commentator shouldn't, it's hard. In the rule book, it's like the announcer is there to announce the next lift and the lifter after that and to say what weight's on the bar. That's their job. But having a good commentator that can then work in crowd work and hyping up the lifter and hyping up the crowd without being a dickhead, nothing. I'd rather a silent commentator than a commentator that's annoying. A good commentator is so important to changing the entire experience for everyone involved. So important. There needs to be crowd work. There needs to be crowd interaction. There needs to be lifter interviews in between lifts. There needs to be stuff that actually makes it a sport. We need to be going above and beyond what's already being done. What's being done, we know for a fact doesn't work from a commercial viability perspective. We know it doesn't work because we don't have it. So let's do better. Let's look at other sports and take inspiration from that and grow and develop because of that. That is going to contribute to the next thing, which is like sponsors and brand involvement. Again, the sponsors can't be completely insular. Because there's no massive companies in powerlifting outside of, a couple of equipment companies. But you couldn't say Alico, for example. Is Alico heavily in powerlifting? Yeah, for sure. But I guarantee they make most of their money through something like weightlifting or general gym fit outs. Same thing if you look at Rogue. Yeah, Rogue's in powerlifting for sure, but their money's not in Rogue. In powerlifting, like powerlifting's a tiny little arm of their business compared to something like CrossFit. So like we need commercial interest from bigger and bigger companies. Nike's doing weightlifting stuff now. Danny Grigsby was involved in a Nike commercial. We need something like Nike coming in with a powerlifting, a powerlifting team of some sort. That's what we need if we're going to create commercial viability, attract bigger and better sponsors. Like, look at the sponsors that sponsor professional sports. They have nothing to do with the sport. They sponsor the sport because the sport has eyes on it. At the moment, it's only appealing to powerlifting brands because the only eyes on powerlifting are powerlifters. So, like, of course a powerlifting brand's going to sponsor the sport. And of course Toyota's not, because the eyes that are looking at it are powerlifters. They're not attracting a new market. All these powerlifters are seeing Toyota in other places. They don't need a sponsored powerlifting. And professional pathways. One of the most limiting thing with powerlifting is how fractured it is and how easily fractured it is. Like, you just branch off and start another federation. That's not a good way to craft a direction towards a professional sport. So we need to have a professional pathway. There needs to be, pro series where there are feeder competitions into it are fantastic, but they're still very insular. We need a global unification where there are true pathways that are locked in across the board. We need to have, there's... Again, look at the big sports. Look at the National Hockey League, NHL in America. You get to the NHL championships by playing NHL games. That's it. We need that. And the hard thing is that powerlifting is so fractured between all these different federations that everyone's just trying to do their own thing on their own. There's very little collaboration, communication for a variety of reasons. All right. I've been slamming this for a while now. I think that's enough. There's so much more that could be said on this topic. Thank you for listening. Hit me with any suggestions you want to hear me talk about. Let's keep doing it. Bye.